Welcome Cancer to your in-depth monthly horoscope for June 2024 for the Ascendant, the Sun or the Moon. On the screen now I'm showing the event chart right at the start of the month, and we need to be mindful of your ruling planet, the Moon. The Moon starts the month in your ninth house. The ninth house is where we explore, can be where we expand and amplify. It can also be about higher knowledge, but in the sign of Pisces, that higher knowledge can be faith orientated or very spiritually orientated. So having the Moon so close to Neptune, the ruler of the sign of Pisces, suggests you're in the mood to widen your perspectives in terms of your understanding of the meaning of life. But it's interesting because the co-ruler of the sign of Pisces is Jupiter. And Jupiter's just tucked up in your 12th house. Again, a very Piscean feel. The 12th house is the sector of culmination. And Jupiter and Neptune are collaborating. But in a way, Jupiter, Venus and the Sun want you to remove yourself from the limelight, which is an interesting paradox because Mars, the planet of thrust, desire, ambition in terms of where it's located for you, is in house 10. You want to seize attention, you want to articulate your power and, if need be, your authority. But there's another part of you that may in some ways want to squirrel yourself away. So in the early parts of this month, anything to do with healing, retreats, meditations, traditional religion or modern philosophies can really have a very strong pull for you. But you could, particularly if you work in those areas, find yourself in some kind of leadership role, which is raising the profile for these areas. So that, in a way, gives you a conflict. It's a conflict that will get solved as the month goes on, because we have the summer solstice on the 20th and the sun returns to your sign, as it does at this time of the year, but it does so this year with Venus and Mercury. In fact, they precede the sun. They're moving into your sign along with the sun from the 17th, and that really glows you up. But what you're doing from the start of the month until then is going through a period of deep reflection, deep preparation, or maybe working on things that are to do with your psyche, or thinking very much about your past history. So it may be that you're going to be reminiscing, feeling quite nostalgic, researching your family tree, perhaps heading off, if you are going to holiday, to somewhere that you can really rest, somewhere that's very peaceful and definitely has a water dimension to it, but perhaps some kind of connection to ancient history and culture, because those artifacts or buildings that you see or handle can be very enriching for your senses. So some kind of escapism or withdrawal has to coexist at the start of this month with another part of you that wants to be noticed, wants to be taken seriously, wants to be seen as an authority. So that's the picture at the start of the month. We also have Jupiter back in the sign of Gemini for the first time in 12 years, forging an amazing link to Pluto. Pluto is in its retrograde now in Aquarius. It's going to be coming back into Aquarius on the 20th of November, but it does actually retreat back into your sector of relating on the 1st of September. And I feel because Pluto links to Jupiter, and for you that's house 12 Jupiter, knowledge, philosophical, psychological, faith, but Pluto in the 8th house can be ends and beginnings in a very dramatic way. And the 8th house, of course, can be about reincarnation, but it also can be about where things do run their course. So you're going to be thinking very profoundly, deeply at the start of this month. If there has been someone who's no longer in your life, maybe it was to do with a passing, maybe it is somebody that was very, very special to you, your connection to that person's spirit can be incredibly strong in the first part of this month. And the memories that evokes can be very, very vivid. Don't be surprised if you're having some very intense dreams. You may even find yourself wanting to go to places of worship or places that are very tranquil. If you can't go on a long distance travel because your circumstances don't allow it, you can still get into nature. You can still get by water. That can be very, very healing for you. But if you are interested in alternative medicine and having some therapeutic treatments, that can be very enriching. If you're thinking of having some counselling, very enriching. Because what you unlock, what you decode at the start of this month can be so valuable. But what can be perhaps a provocation in a positive way to embrace some tender parts of your existence could be Uranus, because Uranus continues in your 11th house, which is your future, your highest hopes, but also it's to do with your friendships. And because Mercury is very close to Uranus at the start of this month, it could be someone who in some ways challenges you. They don't necessarily accept the story, or as you see it, your history as you describe it. They may be someone who themselves will, in a caring way, be saying, but what about this? What about that? All this is going to give you a huge amount of food for thought. But then, by the 3rd, what a day, Mercury moves into your 12th house as well. Can I be honest? Mercury loves being in Gemini. It rules this sign, but Mercury doesn't like being in the 12th house. The 12th house can see our thoughts trapped. We can also start to repeat our thoughts in a kind of repetitive way, but find it more difficult to articulate them because the 12th house wants to see us be private. Also, having Jupiter and Venus in the 12th house means that if a relationship has run its course, there could be an ending and there could be a separation or a loss. It could be your choice. It could be someone else decides to distance themselves from you. Just because they're the planets of fortune, the 12th house, raking through the debris of what you can gain when there's a breakup or a separation is not always a very pleasant experience. But that doesn't mean to say it can't be enriching. So the role of Pluto and Jupiter in this month is very strong the first 11 days. They're within 3 degrees. So some big revelations may be coming your way. You may be changing your relationship to your past view of a story that you felt absolutely in the right about. But that's the problem with Jupiter. It can be to do with dogma, and Pluto can be to do with power. And because Pluto was going through your sector of relating for so long, from 2008 until those 11 weeks last year, and from the 21st of January this year, that maybe some of the certainties you had are being challenged by the democratic state that is Aquarius, which is more cool, it's more detached. It's not so conventional. There is part of you that can be rooted in convention. You could be someone who's very much someone who embraces the counterculture, see yourself as quite radical, outspoken and independent and individual, yet there may be another part of your nature that's so rooted in convention it's hard to see it. But Pluto moving into Aquarius is nudging you and trying to awake within you a much deeper understanding of your motivations, your psychological and your life patterns and life purpose. But Mercury moves, as I mentioned before, on the 3rd, but it does join up with Jupiter. So you could get some information or some news that really pleases you, and it may be a surprise. But then on the 6th, we have a new moon. It's a new moon, however, that is in a conjunction with Venus. We have to be aware that Venus can be lovely in its rulership of Taurus. It's very much about our self-worth, it's about money, it's about security, can be about our creative talent, can be about our love of food, of growing things. It can also be about a little bit of luxury, but it also can be about artistic aesthetics. But its rulership of the sign of Libra is about relationships. It's about how we interact with people, but it can be a bit superficial. It can be like saying the things that won't rock the boat, and you generally don't like conflict. So what you need to ask yourself here in this particular new moon, is there the potential to discuss some things in a gentle, tender way which releases some past hurts or some past views in a way that liberates you? Or is it going to be the case that you are actually going to separate yourself from something that no longer works for you? And because Mars, for the first 9 days of this month, is in such a dominant part of your situation, one of the things I'd really caution you against is letting pride get in the way of your decision making, because Mars obviously loves being in Aries, it rules the sign, but it's very, very close to Chiron at the start of this month. And if you're maintaining an aura of confidence, certainty and authority because you're shielding yourself, you may actually shield away the opportunity to grow by being more vulnerable. And the start of this month really asks you to be more vulnerable. But then we have week 2, a big clash. Saturn applies its more exacting instincts to both the Sun and Venus. And the truth of a particular alliance can become much more amplified. Remember I said at the start, the ninth house can amplify. Saturn generally limits, but in the ninth house here, in the right angle with the Sun and Venus, it's showing you the truth. Now it could be that you're showing someone else the truth and they're really reluctant to see it. But it's also possible that someone could confront you with a side of your nature and way of being that you just haven't been aware of. And it could be quite a rude awakening, to be honest. But from the 14th to the 16th, Venus and Mercury move into your sign. Venus is perfectly happy in Cancer, Mercury less so. Mercury likes logic, it also likes practicalities. In your sign, the emotion erodes that logic. But it is saying, really, in some ways, you're moving back into your energy. And then on the 20th, with the summer solstice, the sun moves back to your sign. It's a dramatic event in the whole year. It's the second cardinal quadrant, ushering in a 13-week period where we all need to be more mindful of stability, security, nurture, and anything to do with emotion, family, where we live. But having Venus and Mercury there this year means this can be a very powerful next 13 weeks in a very positive way. Yeah? Well, yes. It's just that we have an almost immediate full moon on the 22nd. And that full moon is in the bête noire of your sign, which is Capricorn, because that's where your ruler struggles the most. So the moon in its opposition with the sun is never necessarily an easy event because they're competing. They have very different energies. They're not integrated like a new moon, but this one squares up with that dreamy, drifting, distorting potential that's Neptune that was there right at the start of the month in the conjunction with your moon. So what I would say is Neptune therefore squares up with both Venus and Mercury as well. So however much you may want to start to visualize how you'd like to move into the moment and gain your power back, which you may feel has been pulled away from you a little bit by the energy of Neptune, having the moon in its weakest position in its whole journey is not ideal. But on the 9th, Mars moves out of that dominating position and into the sign of Taurus, which is about friendship. This is good, you know, because in a way, Uranus is quite an edgy, unpredictable influence in your 11th house. Mars can see you, in a way, let go of the need to be top dog in Aries in the 10th house, and much more able to put your ego need to one side and collaborate with people, but it does clash with Pluto. And this is one of astrology's most challenging influences. So your 11th house is where you want to think about your future and be idealistic. The 8th house is where you're really invested with others. If you want something different from a romantic relationship from a partner, that could be another tension builder. If you don't see that person as being someone you can really collaborate with for the long term, this on top of the square between the Sun, Venus and Saturn could be another exit point in a really weak tie. But then, as the month draws to a close, Saturn going into a retrograde for 20 weeks, in itself, yes, it's going to inverse around about 7 degrees, what it will do in that time is just ask you to recheck some of what you thought were the facts or the truth about a particular matter. It doesn't mean to say you're going to be wrong. Or it could be that a legal matter or a contractual matter will need a lot of scrutiny. It may slow down, it might not take off in quite the way you want. But the big picture of this month, Cancer, is therefore there's a lot of growth to be had at a psychological level in your chart. Don't let your pride get in the way of that. There could be some cut-off points in terms of relationships that have run their course in week 2 with the square between Saturn, the Sun and Venus, but also from the 9th in the square between Mars and Pluto, and some power and tense scenes could play out. But I feel as the month draws to a close, even if it's a bit of a struggle to feel grounded and in the moment, you're going to be determined to get back in control of what you can influence, even if you may in some ways still be processing some very painful, very sensitive energies, or some big knowledge that's downloaded about your life in general in the earlier parts of this month. It's been wonderful to be with you. Have a great June. Please do support the channel, and please do check out my special astrology report package underneath this video for both tropical and also draconic astrology, 30% off.